Мною принято решение о проведении специальной военной операции.
We're rapidly approaching the third anniversary of Putin's 72-hour special military operation to subdue Ukraine. With calls for peace talks mounting, Russia continues to do its best to obliterate Ukraine, but has incurred staggering military losses. Just how bad is staggering? Well, join me as we take a deep dive into Russian casualty numbers. I'm former Navy SEAL Team 6 Squadron Leader Chuck Farr, and this is the Kyiv Post's Point of Impact. Just this week, Putin spokesman Dmitry Peskov reiterated Russia's claim that Moscow remains open to negotiations. His voice is added to a cacophony of calls to Ukraine to immediately enter peace talks to end Russia's invasion. But who really needs negotiations? Kyiv or Moscow? Well, the answer may surprise you. First, a little history may be instructive. On the first day of February 2022, even as Russian troops massed on the border, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov personally assured UK Minister Liz Truss that Russia had no plans to invade Ukraine. 12 hours later, more than 400,000 troops rolled across Ukraine's frontiers. Any future peace talks that involved Foreign Minister Lavrov would be an irrelevant waste of breath. But moving on. Russia did invade, and they came on strong. Though Russian troops initially achieved some success, early in the war there were notable and key Russian defeats. One of the most critical early battles occurred at the Hostomel airport, north of Kyiv. In February and March, Russian airborne forces attempted to capture the runways of this strategic airbase to use as a staging ground for operations against Kyiv. The attack was carried out by the flower of Putin's forces, Russia's elite VDV paratroopers, and helicopter-borne assault troops. Though Ukrainian forces were initially taken by surprise, they quickly mobilized, and a mobile and asymmetrical defense. Fierce combat ensued. While the Russians did initially manage to land troops, without reinforcements, they were unable to secure the airport. Between 3 and 8 March, Ukrainian units engaged Russian forces in urban combat inside Hostomel and repelled a last-ditch Russian offensive. Defeated, the Russian paratroopers withdrew, and the advance on Kyiv was stalled. This David versus Goliath battle saved the Ukrainian capital. But Russia's goal was to invade and subdue Ukraine. The Russians continued the fight. In the first year of the full-scale invasion, Russian forces incurred more than 105,970 casualties, including killed, wounded, missing, deserted, and surrendered. Combat was waged across Ukraine, in the east principally, but also in the south, with Russia suffering an approximate daily casualty rate of 290 troops per day. These numbers are estimated mean daily losses. In the first year of the full-scale war, Russian casualty numbers varied between 120 and 500 troops killed in each 24-hour period, depending on the tactical situation. The 105,970 Russian casualties in the first 12 months of the Russian-Ukraine war are approximately 7 times the official and absurdly low Soviet loss rate of 15,000 troops killed in the 9-year Soviet-Afghan War. Things clearly were not going well for Moscow, but they would soon get worse. In late August 2022, Ukrainian forces began an offensive that managed to recapture Kherson City by November. As those battles raged, in September, Ukrainian forces attacked in Kharkiv. Ukrainian troops managed to exploit a weakened Russian front, and the disorganized and disaffected Russian troops broke and scattered. Ukraine recaptured over 500 settlements and approximately 12,000 square kilometers of territory in Kharkiv Oblast. In 2023, the second year of the Russian invasion, Russia was widely viewed to have redoubled its efforts. It was able, after some difficulty, to stabilize the front with an appropriate increase in troop losses. In 2023, the second year of the war, the annual Russian casualty figures increased by more than 100%, doubling to a total of 252,569 troops killed, wounded, and missing. As Russia resorted increasingly to a series of grinding, daylight, single-axis attacks, the daily loss rate of Russian troops tripled to 691 average casualties per day. For the first time in the war, daily Russian casualties routinely reached 1,000 troops killed in battle. As Russian headlong attacks continued, Ukrainian commanders settled into a defensive-based, attritional set of battles, inflicting heavy casualties at every point of contact. Russian losses, already impressive, continued to mount, which brings us to 2024, a year seen by some military analysts as Russia's most successful in terms of land captured. So, how successful was 2024 for Putin's troops? Again, the numbers tell a different story. Russian attacks by this point had become piecemeal and sloppy. No attempt was made to assemble large Russian formations to conduct coordinated ground maneuver operations. Thousands of attacks, most of squad and platoon size, were used to grind away at Ukrainian positions. These Russian attacks, taken individually, were failures. Unsupported Russian units conducting assaults routinely lost between 35 and 85% of their troops on contact with Ukrainian units. Some attacking Russian troops, up to battalion-sized, sustained 100% casualties. Just one failed Russian attack on the Oskil River near Kupiansk saw 90 Russian troops killed in two 20-minute engagements. The Russians mounted this attack in broad daylight and were annihilated by mines, FPV drones, and precision artillery strikes. In the first quarter of 2024, Russia reached a grim milestone. 26 months into Putin's 72-hour special military operation, Russian casualties topped 400,000. This means, in rough numbers, that Putin's battlefield commanders had lost every single soldier who entered Ukraine in the original invasion force. For all intents and purposes, Putin's entire invasion force had been destroyed in a little bit more than 26 months. But Russian mobilizations continued, and more civilians were put into uniform and shipped to the front. And the worst Russian losses were yet to come. Despite these staggering and frankly unsustainable losses, Russia pressed forward with the ineffective tactic of small-scale assaults along the length of the zero line. As 2024 dragged on, Russian casualty rates again skyrocketed. Russian forces routinely lost 300 to 500 troops in a single engagement. For the year, the average daily loss rate of Russian troops in battle had again doubled from 2023. By now, Russia was losing a daily average of 1,180 troops in each 24-hour period. There were occasions when Russian forces lost as many as 1,500 and even 2,000 troops in a single day. Russia's not so impressive gains of Ukrainian territory must be offset by the 400 square kilometers lost to the Ukrainian incursion into Kursk Oblast. Putin had boldly claimed that he would wipe out the Ukrainian occupiers of Kursk in time for President Trump's inauguration. Only that didn't happen. Despite the help of 10,000 crack North Korean troops who were sent headlong into battle without supporting fires or reinforcements, as many as 4,000 North Korean troops, approximately 40%, became casualties. At the time of this writing, it's reported that all North Korean troops have been withdrawn from Kursk. Today, Russia's total casualties in Ukraine exceed 812,670. This is twice the number of U.S. casualties in the 4 years of global combat in World War II. It is almost 15 times the numbers of U.S. casualties suffered in 10 years of war in Vietnam, and more than total casualties suffered by the United States during the 4 desperate years of the American Civil War. Voices urge Ukraine to the negotiation table before the war is lost. Ukraine is not losing this war. Russia is. What's more, Russia has no plan to win the war. There will be no grand Russian offensive to capture Kyiv this summer, or the next, or the next. The Russian army is fought to a frazzle. Its troops are tired. Morale is abysmal, and Putin's hand-picked cadre of military buffoons are incapable of waging the sort of large-scale land warfare campaigns required to win a war. Russia is in a quagmire and is no longer capable of winning the war in Ukraine. It's not Kyiv who needs negotiation. It's Putin. To date, Russia has lost an astounding 9,938 main battle tanks, 20,709 armored fighting vehicles, 35,921 trucks, fuel tankers, and logistical vehicles, 22,655 artillery systems, 369 fighters, strike fighters, reconnaissance, airborne early warning and attack aircraft, 331 attack and transport helicopters, 3,054 land attack cruise missiles, and 24,003 unmanned aerial vehicles and drones have been shot down. Russia's Black Sea flotilla has been functionally defeated and driven into the port of Novorossiysk in the extreme eastern waters of the Black Sea. This following the loss of 28 warships, including several amphibious landing ships, a Slava-class guided missile cruiser, patrol ships, missile corvettes, and astoundingly, 1 Kilo-class submarine. All of these losses were inflicted by a nation that doesn't even have a navy. Russia has lost a number of troops equivalent to the entire armed forces of the nation of Britain, France, Spain, and Germany. Not just the armies of these NATO allies, but of their entire number of soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines in these countries. Russia has lost the equivalent of every man, woman in the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, and Coast Guards of Britain, France, Spain, and Germany. Every single person in uniform. All of them. Russia has hundreds of generals, but they're con men and criminals, not warfighters. The inefficiency of Russia's generals is not Putin's problem, it's his legacy. For 20 years, officers in Putin's army climbed the ranks not by merit, not by exhibiting leadership, but by flattery and felony, and going along with the grift, selling equipment, engines, and uniforms from depots, taking kickbacks from military contracts, and waiting patiently for the time to come when they could take their cut. UK Defense Intelligence estimates last year that Russia has committed 95% of its military force to Ukraine. By May of 2025, Russian casualties will reach 1 million. Losses in materiel will keep pace. Soon, Russia will no longer be able to meet its global and strategic military commitments. Russia is not getting stronger. It is getting weaker. And the war the Russians started is no closer to a conclusion. A Russian victory is no longer possible. It is Putin, not Ukraine, who needs a peace plan. So for the Kyiv Post, I'm Navy SEAL Team 6 Squadron Leader Chuck Farr. Hey, and I'm going to see you again at the point of impact.